Question 1. The assessment process reveals that a newly hired marketing associate, in an attempt to solicit feedback on a new campaign concept, shared preliminary, non-public details about an upcoming Disney project with a former industry contact who is now working for a competitor. What is the most appropriate immediate action for the associate's direct manager to take? Option A. Assume the information shared was not significant enough to warrant a formal report, given the associate's good intentions. Option B. Have a private conversation with the associate, emphasizing the importance of confidentiality and advising them to be more careful in the future, without further escalation. Option C. Advise the associate to contact their former colleague to retrieve the shared information and ensure it is not disseminated further. Option D. Document the incident and report it immediately to the company's legal and compliance departments for investigation and guidance on next steps. Correct answer is D. Document the incident and report it immediately to the company's legal and compliance departments for investigation and guidance on next steps. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a scenario where a new employee, eager to impress, has shared confidential project details with a former colleague outside the company. This situation is professionally challenging because it directly implicates a breach of confidentiality, a cornerstone of regulatory compliance and ethical conduct within any organization, especially one dealing with proprietary information like Disney. The employee's intent, while potentially misguided by a desire to seek advice or maintain connections, does not negate the severity of the action. Careful judgment is required to balance disciplinary action with the need for education and prevention. The correct approach involves immediate reporting of the breach to the appropriate internal channels, e.g., legal, compliance, or HR department, and ensuring the employee understands the gravity of their actions and the company's policies on confidentiality. This represents best professional practice because it adheres strictly to regulatory frameworks that mandate the protection of sensitive information. Disney, like many companies, operates under various data protection and intellectual property laws. Prompt reporting ensures that the company can take necessary steps to mitigate any potential damage, investigate the extent of the breach, and reinforce its internal controls. It also aligns with ethical obligations to safeguard proprietary information and maintain stakeholder trust. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the breach, hoping it goes unnoticed or that the former colleague will not misuse the information. This is a regulatory and ethical failure because it demonstrates a disregard for established compliance procedures and a lack of commitment to protecting company assets. It exposes the company to significant legal and financial risks, including potential lawsuits, regulatory fines, and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach would be to confront the employee directly and issue a stern warning without involving the proper authorities. This bypasses established reporting protocols, which are designed to ensure thorough investigation and consistent application of company policy. It also fails to provide the employee with formal training on confidentiality requirements, increasing the likelihood of future breaches. Furthermore, it could lead to inconsistent disciplinary actions, which is itself a compliance risk. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to company policy and relevant regulations. This involves 1. Recognizing a potential compliance issue. 2. Immediately consulting internal policies and procedures regarding data breaches and confidentiality. 3. Reporting the incident through the designated channels without delay. 4. Cooperating fully with any subsequent investigation. 5. Ensuring appropriate training and reinforcement of policies for the involved employee and potentially the wider team. This systematic approach ensures that all breaches are handled consistently, legally, and ethically, minimizing risk to the organization. Question 2. Process analysis reveals that a new content development team is eager to launch a series of short films for a streaming platform, drawing inspiration from various online sources. Some team members suggest using visual elements and narrative concepts that closely resemble existing, popular copyrighted works without explicit permission, arguing that inspiration is not infringement, and that the speed of production is critical for market advantage. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure regulatory compliance and ethical conduct? Option A. Proceed with using the visual elements and narrative concepts as planned, assuming that minor similarities will not be considered infringement and that legal issues can be addressed if they arise. Option B. Prioritize rapid content creation and market entry, and address any potential copyright concerns only if legal challenges are formally initiated by rights holders. Option C. Conduct a thorough review of all source materials to identify any copyrighted elements and secure the necessary licenses or permissions before proceeding with production. Option D. Rely on the external content creator's assurances that their work is original and free of copyright issues without conducting independent verification. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough review of all source materials to identify any copyrighted elements and secure the necessary licenses or permissions before proceeding with production. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual to navigate the complex landscape of intellectual property rights within a creative industry, specifically concerning the unauthorized use of copyrighted material. The core challenge lies in balancing the company's desire for rapid content creation and market presence with the legal and ethical obligations to respect existing intellectual property. Misjudging this balance can lead to significant legal repercussions, reputational damage, and financial penalties. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough due diligence process to verify the originality of content and ensure all necessary licenses or permissions are obtained. This aligns with the principles of intellectual property law, which protect creators' rights and prevent infringement. By proactively seeking legal counsel and confirming the absence of copyright violations, the company upholds its ethical responsibility and mitigates legal risks. This demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance and responsible business practices, which is paramount in the entertainment industry where intellectual property is a core asset. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with content creation without verifying ownership or obtaining necessary permissions, assuming that any publicly available material is free to use. This directly violates copyright laws, which grant exclusive rights to creators. Such an action constitutes intellectual property infringement, exposing the company to lawsuits, injunctions, and substantial damages. Ethically, it is a failure to respect the rights of others. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on the assurances of external content creators without independent verification. While collaboration is common, the ultimate responsibility for ensuring compliance rests with the company commissioning the work. This approach neglects the duty of care and due diligence required to prevent infringement. It can lead to the company being held liable for the actions of its contractors, even if unknowingly. A third incorrect approach is to prioritize speed to market over legal compliance, rationalizing that the risk of detection is low or that potential legal challenges can be dealt with later. This is a fundamentally flawed business strategy that disregards the severe consequences of intellectual property infringement. It demonstrates a lack of ethical integrity and a failure to understand the long-term value of a strong legal and ethical reputation. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field should adopt a proactive and risk-averse approach to intellectual property. This involves establishing clear internal policies and procedures for content creation and acquisition, including mandatory checks for copyright and licensing. When in doubt, seeking expert legal advice is crucial. A robust decision-making process would involve 1. Identifying potential IP risks associated with any new content. 2. Implementing a verification process to confirm originality and ownership. 3. Securing necessary permissions or licenses. 4. Consulting legal counsel for complex or uncertain situations. 5. Prioritizing compliance and ethical conduct over short-term gains. Question 3. The monitoring system demonstrates a pattern of unauthorized access to sensitive financial data by a specific employee, which appears to be a violation of Disney's internal data security policies. The employee in question is a peer with whom you have a friendly working relationship. Option A. Discuss the observed policy violation with other colleagues to gauge their opinions before taking any action. Option B. Report the observed policy violation through the company's designated compliance hotline or to your direct supervisor. Option C. Confront the colleague directly about their actions and ask them to stop. Option D. Ignore the observed policy violation, assuming it is a minor oversight that will be corrected. The correct answer is B. Report the observed policy violation through the company's designated compliance hotline or to your direct supervisor. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves a conflict between a company's internal policies, potential legal implications, and the ethical responsibility to report misconduct. The employee is aware of a breach that could have significant financial and reputational consequences for Disney, and their inaction could be interpreted as complicity. The pressure to maintain good standing with management, coupled with the fear of reprisal, creates a complex ethical dilemma requiring careful judgment. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves reporting the observed policy violation through the designated internal channels, such as a compliance hotline or direct report to a supervisor or HR. This aligns with Disney's commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory compliance, as outlined in its code of conduct and any relevant internal policies. Prompt reporting allows the company to investigate, mitigate damages, and take appropriate corrective action, thereby upholding its legal and ethical obligations. This proactive stance demonstrates integrity and a commitment to corporate responsibility, which are paramount in maintaining trust with stakeholders and adhering to industry best practices. Incorrect approaches analysis. Failing to report the violation is a significant ethical and potentially legal failure. It can be seen as condoning the misconduct, which undermines the company's integrity and could lead to more severe consequences if the issue escalates. This inaction also violates the spirit, if not the letter, of many corporate codes of conduct that mandate reporting of policy breaches. Confronting the colleague directly without involving the proper channels can be problematic. While it might seem like a direct solution, it bypasses established procedures designed for fair investigation and resolution. It could also lead to an escalation of conflict, potential retaliation against the reporting employee, or an incomplete understanding of the situation by the involved parties, thus hindering an effective resolution. Ignoring the issue and hoping it resolves itself is a passive approach that abdicates responsibility. This inaction allows the policy violation to persist, potentially leading to greater harm to the company and its stakeholders. It demonstrates a lack of professional accountability and a disregard for the company's ethical framework. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such dilemmas should first consult their company's code of conduct and relevant policies to understand the established reporting procedures. They should then prioritize reporting the observed issue through the appropriate channels, ensuring documentation of their actions. If unsure about the process or potential repercussions, seeking guidance from HR or a compliance officer is advisable. The decision-making process should be guided by principles of integrity, accountability, and adherence to established ethical and legal frameworks. Question 4. Process analysis reveals that the guest check-in experience at a popular Disney resort is experiencing significant delays during peak seasons, leading to increased guest frustration. To address this, a team is tasked with optimizing the check-in process. Which of the following approaches would best align with professional best practices for process optimization within a guest-focused organization like Disney? Option A. Rely on the personal opinions of the most senior managers regarding the perceived causes of the delays and implement their suggested changes without further investigation or data collection. Option B. Prioritize a drastic reduction in staffing levels at the check-in desks to cut operational costs, assuming that guests will adapt to longer wait times if the overall resort experience is positive. Option C. Immediately implement a new, fully automated check-in system based on a competitor's successful model without extensive testing or staff training to quickly reduce wait times. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the current check-in process, gathering data on wait times, guest feedback, and staff observations. Then collaboratively brainstorm and pilot potential solutions, with a focus on enhancing efficiency without compromising the personalized guest experience. The correct answer is C. Immediately implement a new, fully automated check-in system based on a competitor's successful model without extensive testing or staff training to quickly reduce wait times. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in process optimization within a large entertainment organization like Disney. The core difficulty lies in balancing the desire for efficiency and cost reduction with the imperative to maintain the quality and unique experience that defines the Disney brand. Stakeholder buy-in is crucial, as changes to established processes can impact various departments, employee morale, and ultimately guest satisfaction. The challenge is to identify improvements that are not only operationally sound, but also strategically aligned with Disney's core values and guest expectations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a holistic and data-driven methodology, aligning with best practices in process optimization and Disney's commitment to excellence. It begins with a thorough understanding of the current state, involving detailed mapping of existing workflows and identifying bottlenecks through objective metrics. This is followed by a collaborative ideation phase, where diverse perspectives are gathered from frontline staff to management, ensuring that potential solutions are practical and consider the human element. The selection of solutions prioritizes those that demonstrably improve efficiency without compromising guest experience or brand integrity. Pilot testing and phased implementation allow for controlled evaluation and adaptation, minimizing disruption and risk. Continuous monitoring and feedback loops ensure sustained improvement and adaptability. This approach is professionally sound because it is systematic, evidence-based, and stakeholder-centric, minimizing the risk of unintended negative consequences and maximizing the likelihood of successful, sustainable optimization. It reflects a commitment to responsible innovation and operational excellence, which are implicitly expected of a company like Disney. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing changes based solely on anecdotal evidence or the loudest voice in the room represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It bypasses the need for objective data and rigorous analysis, potentially leading to decisions that are detrimental to operational efficiency, employee morale, or guest satisfaction. This approach lacks accountability and can result in wasted resources and reputational damage. Focusing exclusively on cost reduction without considering the impact on quality or guest experience is another critical failure. While cost efficiency is important, Disney's brand is built on delivering exceptional experiences. Sacrificing this for short-term savings would violate the implicit trust guests place in the brand and could lead to long-term revenue loss and brand erosion. This approach is ethically questionable as it prioritizes financial gain over the core promise to the customer. Adopting a move fast and break things mentality, often associated with rapid tech development, is inappropriate for a company like Disney. The potential for disruption to established, complex operational systems and the impact on a large, diverse workforce and millions of guests necessitate a more measured and controlled approach. This methodology risks significant operational failures, negative guest experiences, and potential breaches of service-level agreements or operational standards, which could have regulatory implications if they impact safety or accessibility. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with process optimization should adopt a structured, iterative approach. This involves clearly defining the problem, gathering comprehensive data, involving relevant stakeholders, exploring a range of potential solutions, rigorously evaluating them against defined criteria, including efficiency, quality, cost, and guest impact, piloting promising solutions, implementing them in a controlled manner, and establishing mechanisms for ongoing monitoring and refinement. This framework ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with organizational goals and ethical responsibilities. Question 5. The efficiency study reveals a significant delay in processing and acting upon guest feedback collected through various channels, impacting the ability to promptly address service gaps and enhance the overall theme park experience. Considering the stakeholder perspective, which of the following strategies would best address this inefficiency while upholding Disney's commitment to guest satisfaction and operational excellence? Option A. Shift entirely to post-visit email surveys, significantly increasing their length and complexity to capture a wider range of guest opinions, and discontinuing all on-site feedback mechanisms. Option B. Introduce mandatory, comprehensive in-person guest satisfaction questionnaires administered by trained staff at the exit of each major attraction, requiring detailed responses before guests can depart the park. Option C. Implement a multi-channel feedback system that integrates real-time data from digital platforms and empowers frontline cast members to gather and relay immediate guest sentiment, with clear protocols for rapid issue resolution and service recovery. Option D. Establish a centralized, anonymous feedback repository where all guest comments are stored without any mechanism for identifying specific operational areas or individual guest experiences for follow-up. Correct answer is C. Implement a multi-channel feedback system that integrates real-time data from digital platforms and empowers frontline cast members to gather and relay immediate guest sentiment, with clear protocols for rapid issue resolution and service recovery. Explanation: the efficiency study reveals a significant bottleneck in the guest experience feedback loop at a Disney theme park, specifically concerning the collection and analysis of on-site guest satisfaction data. This scenario is professionally challenging because it directly impacts the core mission of Disney to deliver exceptional guest experiences. Balancing the need for immediate operational improvements with the long-term strategic goal of maintaining brand reputation requires careful judgment. The challenge lies in identifying the root cause of the inefficiency without compromising guest privacy or the authenticity of feedback. The correct approach, focusing on enhancing the existing digital feedback channels and empowering frontline cast members to proactively solicit feedback, represents best professional practice. This aligns with Disney's commitment to guest centricity and innovation. Ethically, it respects guest autonomy by offering convenient and non-intrusive ways to share their experiences. Regulationally, it adheres to data privacy principles by ensuring consent and secure handling of any collected information, assuming compliance with relevant data protection laws, e.g., CCPA in California, if applicable to the specific Disney entity. This approach fosters a culture of continuous improvement by integrating feedback into daily operations. An incorrect approach that involves mandating lengthy, in-person surveys for every guest would be professionally unacceptable. This would create a significant guest friction point, detracting from the magical experience Disney aims to provide, and would likely result in low participation rates and biased, rushed feedback. Ethically, it could be perceived as intrusive and burdensome. Another incorrect approach, relying solely on post-visit email surveys without any on-site engagement, fails to capture immediate, contextual feedback and misses opportunities to address issues in real time, potentially leading to unresolved guest dissatisfaction and negative word of mouth. This neglects the proactive service culture Disney champions. A third incorrect approach, anonymizing all feedback to the point where no actionable insights can be derived or follow-up can occur, while seemingly protecting privacy, would render the feedback collection process largely ineffective for operational improvement and guest recovery. This fails to leverage feedback for its intended purpose of enhancing the guest experience. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes guest experience, operational efficiency, and ethical data handling. This involves understanding the stakeholder perspectives: guests seeking seamless and enjoyable experiences, cast members empowered to serve, and management focused on operational excellence and brand reputation. The process should involve identifying the problem, brainstorming solutions that align with company values, evaluating these solutions against ethical and operational criteria, and implementing the most effective and responsible option. Continuous monitoring and adaptation are crucial. Question 6. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a new, potentially controversial, entertainment initiative is ready for public announcement. The marketing department is eager to release the information immediately to capitalize on current trends, but the legal and compliance teams have raised concerns about potential negative public perception and the need for a thorough evaluation of its impact on brand reputation and stakeholder relations. Which of the following represents the most appropriate next step to ensure regulatory compliance and responsible communication? Option A. Proceed with the announcement immediately, as the marketing team has identified a timely opportunity, and address any potential backlash reactively. Option B. Rely on informal feedback from a few key industry contacts to gauge public sentiment and proceed with the announcement if the feedback is generally positive. Option C. Postpone the announcement indefinitely until all potential negative perceptions can be completely eliminated, which may be an unrealistic goal. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive, cross-functional impact assessment involving legal, compliance, marketing, and public relations to thoroughly evaluate potential risks and benefits before any public announcement. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the announcement immediately, as the marketing team has identified a timely opportunity, and address any potential backlash reactively. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for timely and impactful communication with the imperative to conduct a thorough and compliant impact assessment. The pressure to release information quickly, especially in a public-facing organization like Disney, can create a temptation to bypass or abbreviate crucial assessment steps. The core of the challenge lies in ensuring that the assessment is not merely a procedural hurdle, but a genuine evaluation of potential consequences, aligning with regulatory expectations for responsible corporate behavior and stakeholder engagement. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a comprehensive and documented impact assessment before public disclosure. This aligns with regulatory frameworks that often mandate due diligence and risk mitigation for significant communications or policy changes. By conducting a thorough assessment, the organization demonstrates a commitment to understanding and addressing potential negative consequences, whether they be reputational, operational, or related to stakeholder trust. This proactive stance is ethically sound, fostering transparency and accountability, and is often a de facto requirement for maintaining regulatory compliance and public confidence. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the speed of communication without a proper impact assessment fails to meet regulatory expectations for risk management. This could lead to unforeseen negative consequences that were not adequately considered, potentially resulting in regulatory scrutiny or penalties. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of diligence and a disregard for potential harm to stakeholders or the company's reputation. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or informal consultations for the impact assessment is also professionally unacceptable. Regulatory frameworks typically require objective and systematic evaluation. Relying on informal feedback can lead to biased conclusions and an incomplete understanding of the true impact, thereby failing to identify and mitigate significant risks. This can expose the organization to legal and reputational damage. A third incorrect approach that delegates the entire impact assessment to a single department without cross-functional input or senior management oversight is problematic. Impact assessments often have broad implications, affecting various departments and stakeholders. A siloed approach can lead to blind spots and an incomplete picture of the potential consequences. This failure to engage relevant expertise and ensure accountability at appropriate levels can result in a flawed assessment and subsequent poor decision-making, potentially violating principles of good corporate governance and risk management. Professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Identify the communication or policy change requiring assessment. 2. Define the scope and objectives of the impact assessment, considering all relevant regulatory requirements. 3. Gather data and input from all affected departments and relevant external stakeholders. 4. Analyze potential positive and negative impacts across various dimensions, e.g., financial, operational, reputational, legal, ethical. 5. Develop mitigation strategies for identified risks. 6. Document the entire assessment process and findings. 7. Obtain necessary approvals based on the assessment results before proceeding with the communication or change. 8. Monitor and review the impact post-implementation. Question 7. The performance metrics show that while one creative associate consistently meets project deadlines and delivers a high volume of work, another associate, though occasionally missing deadlines, has been instrumental in developing groundbreaking concepts that have significantly boosted audience engagement for recent flagship projects. Which approach to performance evaluation best reflects a commitment to recognizing diverse contributions within a creative organization? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive review that includes feedback from peers, supervisors, and project stakeholders, alongside an analysis of the impact and innovation of the associate's conceptual contributions, to provide a balanced assessment of both individuals. Option B. Evaluate performance primarily based on the supervisor's personal observations and subjective judgment of each associate's attitude and perceived effort. Option C. Focus solely on the quantitative output of each associate, such as the number of completed tasks and adherence to timelines, as these are objective measures of performance. Option D. Prioritize the associate who consistently meets deadlines and delivers a high volume of work, as this demonstrates reliability and efficiency, which are key performance indicators. The correct answer is D. Prioritize the associate who consistently meets deadlines and delivers a high volume of work, as this demonstrates reliability and efficiency, which are key performance indicators. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent subjectivity in evaluating creative output and the potential for bias to influence performance assessments. Disney, as a leader in entertainment, relies heavily on the innovative contributions of its creative teams. Ensuring fair and objective evaluation of these contributions is paramount to maintaining morale, fostering a productive work environment, and adhering to ethical employment practices. The challenge lies in balancing the qualitative nature of creative work with the need for measurable performance indicators. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a multifaceted evaluation that incorporates both objective data and qualitative feedback from diverse sources. This aligns with principles of fairness and transparency in performance management. By seeking input from peers, supervisors, and even direct reports, where applicable, the assessment process becomes more robust and less susceptible to individual bias. This comprehensive view ensures that an individual's contributions are recognized from various perspectives, reflecting the collaborative nature of creative projects. Ethically, this approach upholds the dignity of the employee by ensuring their performance is judged on a broad spectrum of their work and impact, rather than a single, potentially flawed metric. An incorrect approach that relies solely on quantitative metrics, such as the number of projects completed or hours billed, fails to capture the true value of creative contributions. This is a regulatory and ethical failure because it can lead to the undervaluation of complex, innovative, or high-impact work that may not be easily quantifiable. It can also incentivize quantity over quality, which is detrimental to Disney's brand. Another incorrect approach that focuses only on supervisors' subjective opinion is ethically problematic as it can be influenced by personal relationships, unconscious biases, or a lack of full understanding of the employee's day-to-day contributions. This can lead to unfair assessments and potential discrimination. An approach that ignores feedback from team members who directly collaborate with the individual is also flawed, as it misses crucial insights into teamwork, problem-solving, and the overall impact on project success. This can lead to an incomplete and potentially inaccurate performance evaluation, violating principles of fair assessment. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve 1. Identifying the core objective of the performance evaluation, e.g., assessing creative contribution, leadership, teamwork. 2. Recognizing the inherent limitations of purely quantitative or purely qualitative measures in the specific context. 3. Designing a balanced assessment framework that incorporates multiple data points and perspectives. 4. Ensuring transparency in the evaluation process and providing clear criteria for assessment. 5. Establishing mechanisms for feedback and appeal to ensure fairness and address potential biases. Question 8. Process analysis reveals that a company is considering a complex financial arrangement that, while having a specific legal structure, has an economic outcome that significantly differs from its outward appearance. The accounting team is debating whether to record the transaction based on its legal form or its underlying economic substance. Which of the following approaches best reflects professional accounting practice in this situation? Option A. Apply accounting standards in a manner that achieves the most favorable financial reporting outcome, even if it requires a less common interpretation of the rules. Option B. Record the transaction strictly according to its legal form, as this is the most straightforward and defensible approach from a compliance perspective. Option C. Prioritize the economic substance of the transaction over its legal form to ensure financial statements accurately reflect the company's financial reality. Option D. Seek external legal counsel to determine the definitive legal interpretation, and then record the transaction solely based on that interpretation, irrespective of economic implications. Correct answer is C. Prioritize the economic substance of the transaction over its legal form to ensure financial statements accurately reflect the company's financial reality. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for accurate and timely financial reporting with the potential for misinterpretation or manipulation of complex accounting standards. The pressure to present a favorable financial picture can lead to aggressive accounting practices, which, while technically compliant with certain interpretations, may not reflect the true economic substance of transactions. Careful judgment is required to ensure that accounting treatments are not only compliant, but also transparent and ethically sound, avoiding practices that could mislead stakeholders. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the principle of substance over form. This means that accounting entries should reflect the economic reality of a transaction, even if the legal form might suggest a different treatment. This aligns with the overarching objective of financial reporting, which is to provide useful information to users for decision-making. Adhering to this principle ensures that financial statements are a faithful representation of the company's financial position and performance, fostering trust and credibility with investors, creditors, and other stakeholders. It also aligns with ethical obligations to be truthful and transparent in financial disclosures. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the legal form of a transaction without considering its economic substance would be a regulatory and ethical failure. This could lead to financial statements that are technically compliant but misleading, potentially violating accounting standards that require consideration of economic reality. Another incorrect approach that involves selectively applying accounting standards to achieve a desired outcome, rather than applying them consistently and objectively, represents a failure in professional integrity and could be considered fraudulent. This undermines the reliability of financial information and violates the duty of care owed to stakeholders. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the relevant accounting standards and their underlying principles. This involves considering the economic substance of transactions, not just their legal form. When faced with complex situations, professionals should seek clarification from authoritative sources, consult with colleagues or experts, and document their reasoning thoroughly. Ethical considerations should be paramount, ensuring that decisions are made with integrity and transparency, and that the ultimate goal is to provide a true and fair view of the company's financial performance and position. Question 9. Quality control measures reveal that a segment within an upcoming animated feature film, intended for a young audience, contains a depiction of a historical event that, while artistically stylized, presents a significant factual inaccuracy that could shape a child's understanding of that event. The creative team believes the stylistic liberty is crucial for the narrative's emotional impact. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Immediately halt production on the segment and demand a complete rewrite from the creative team to ensure absolute historical fidelity, regardless of narrative impact. Option B. Proceed with the release as planned, as artistic interpretation should not be constrained by strict historical accuracy, and address any potential concerns after the film's release. Option C. Allow the segment to remain as is, with a disclaimer at the end of the film acknowledging the artistic license taken with historical events. Option D. Initiate a collaborative review with legal, historical consultants, and the creative team to explore ways to maintain the narrative's emotional impact while correcting the factual inaccuracy or providing appropriate context. The correct answer is D. Initiate a collaborative review with legal, historical consultants, and the creative team to explore ways to maintain the narrative's emotional impact while correcting the factual inaccuracy or providing appropriate context. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to the ethical handling of potentially misleading information within a creative production. The core difficulty lies in balancing the artistic integrity and creative vision of a project, with the responsibility to ensure that the final product does not inadvertently misrepresent factual information or exploit vulnerable audiences, especially given Disney's brand reputation. The need for careful judgment arises from the subjective nature of creative content versus the objective standards of ethical communication and compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a collaborative review process that prioritizes factual accuracy and ethical considerations without stifling creativity. This aligns with best professional practices by engaging relevant stakeholders, including legal counsel and subject matter experts, to assess the potential impact of the content. This proactive engagement ensures that any factual inaccuracies or potentially misleading elements are identified and addressed before public release, thereby upholding Disney's commitment to responsible storytelling and brand integrity. This approach is ethically sound as it prioritizes transparency and avoids potential harm to the audience. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves dismissing the concerns as purely subjective creative interpretation. This fails to acknowledge the potential for factual misrepresentation and the ethical obligation to audiences, particularly younger ones who may be more susceptible to influence. It disregards the professional responsibility to ensure content is not misleading, which could lead to reputational damage and potential regulatory scrutiny if the content is found to violate advertising standards or child protection guidelines. Another incorrect approach is to immediately demand the removal of the content without further investigation. This demonstrates a lack of nuanced judgment and can be detrimental to the creative process and team morale. It bypasses the opportunity for constructive dialogue and problem solving, potentially alienating creative talent and failing to explore less drastic solutions that could achieve both creative and ethical objectives. This approach lacks the professional maturity to balance competing interests. A third incorrect approach is to proceed with the release while internally noting the potential issues for future consideration. This is ethically irresponsible as it knowingly exposes the audience to potentially misleading content. It prioritizes expediency over integrity and fails to uphold the duty of care owed to the public. Such an approach could lead to significant backlash, loss of trust, and potential legal ramifications if the content causes harm or is deemed deceptive. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should employ a structured decision-making process. First, they must objectively assess the nature and severity of the concern, distinguishing between subjective artistic choices and potentially factual inaccuracies or ethical breaches. Second, they should gather all relevant information and consult with appropriate experts, such as legal, compliance, and subject matter specialists. Third, they should engage in open and constructive dialogue with the creative team to understand their intent and explore potential solutions. Finally, decisions should be made based on a comprehensive evaluation of risks, ethical obligations, and brand values, always prioritizing the responsible dissemination of information and the protection of the audience. Question 10. The evaluation methodology shows a need to develop a compelling narrative for a new documentary series about a significant historical event. The production team is under pressure to meet a tight deadline. One proposed approach involves using a popular, albeit potentially biased, historical novel as the primary source for the narrative, with minimal fact-checking beyond cross-referencing with other easily accessible popular media. This approach prioritizes narrative flow and audience engagement over deep historical accuracy. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional ethical standards and responsible content creation in this context? Option A. Prioritize the most sensational aspects of the historical novel to maximize audience interest, assuming that historical accuracy can be secondary to entertainment value. Option B. Use a variety of popular history books and documentaries as sources, focusing on those that present the most dramatic and widely accepted versions of events. Option C. Rely on the chosen historical novel as the main source, supplementing with readily available online summaries to fill in narrative gaps and focus on dramatic storytelling elements. Option D. Conduct extensive primary source research. Consult with academic historians specializing in the period, and engage with descendants of individuals involved in the event to ensure a nuanced and accurate portrayal. Correct answer is D. Conduct extensive primary source research, consult with academic historians specializing in the period, and engage with descendants of individuals involved in the event to ensure a nuanced and accurate portrayal. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing creative freedom with the need for responsible and ethical content creation, particularly when dealing with sensitive historical narratives. The pressure to deliver engaging content quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise accuracy and respect for the subject matter. The professional challenge lies in navigating the potential for misrepresentation and ensuring that the final product is both compelling and factually sound, adhering to established ethical guidelines for historical storytelling. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach demonstrates a commitment to thorough research and consultation, which is paramount when dealing with historical content. This involves engaging with subject matter experts and potentially affected communities to ensure accuracy, nuance, and sensitivity. This aligns with ethical principles of responsible storytelling and avoids the pitfalls of perpetuating misinformation or causing offense. It reflects a professional dedication to truthfulness and respect, which are foundational to maintaining credibility and public trust. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves prioritizing speed and audience appeal over factual accuracy. This can lead to the creation of content that is sensationalized or misrepresents historical events, potentially causing harm and eroding trust. Ethically, this violates the principle of truthfulness and can be seen as a form of professional negligence. Another incorrect approach might involve relying solely on readily available popular accounts without independent verification. This risks perpetuating existing biases or inaccuracies present in those sources. From a regulatory and ethical standpoint, this demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to meet professional standards of research and reporting. A third incorrect approach could be to dismiss concerns raised by experts or community members as overly sensitive or obstructive to creative vision. This displays a lack of empathy and a disregard for the potential impact of the content on individuals and groups connected to the historical narrative. Ethically, this is a failure to engage in respectful dialogue and to consider the broader implications of one's work. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should adopt a decision-making process that prioritizes accuracy, ethical considerations, and stakeholder engagement. This involves 1. Clearly defining the scope and objectives of the project while acknowledging potential sensitivities. 2. Conducting comprehensive research using a variety of credible sources and consulting with subject matter experts. 3. Actively seeking feedback from relevant communities or individuals and being prepared to incorporate constructive criticism. 4. Maintaining transparency about research methodologies and sources. 5. Ultimately, ensuring that the final product is a responsible and accurate representation of the subject matter, even if it requires more time and effort. Question 11. The audit findings indicate a material discrepancy in the revenue recognition for a significant project that was recently completed. The project team is concerned about the potential impact on the company's reported earnings for the quarter. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Conduct a thorough investigation into the root cause of the discrepancy, consult with the legal and compliance departments, and then determine the appropriate corrective action in consultation with senior management and the audit committee. Option B. Classify the discrepancy as immaterial and proceed without any adjustments or further reporting. Option C. Immediately adjust the financial statements to reflect the perceived correct revenue without further investigation or consultation. Option D. Inform senior management and the audit committee of the findings and recommend delaying any adjustments until the next reporting period to avoid negative market reaction. The correct answer is C. Immediately adjust the financial statements to reflect the perceived correct revenue without further investigation or consultation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing the need for accurate financial reporting with the potential for reputational damage. The audit findings, if not addressed appropriately, could lead to significant scrutiny from regulators and investors. The pressure to quickly resolve the issue without fully understanding its implications or consulting relevant parties creates a complex decision-making environment. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough investigation to understand the root cause of the discrepancy, followed by consultation with the legal and compliance departments. This aligns with the principles of accurate financial reporting and regulatory compliance, specifically under U.S. Generally Accepted Accounting Principles (GAAP) and Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) regulations. Companies have a duty to maintain accurate financial records and disclose material information. Consulting legal and compliance ensures that any corrective actions taken are in line with these requirements and that potential legal or regulatory ramifications are mitigated. This proactive and transparent approach demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and good corporate governance, which is paramount for maintaining investor confidence and avoiding penalties. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately correcting the financial statements without a full investigation. This could lead to an incorrect adjustment if the root cause is not understood, potentially creating further inaccuracies or masking a more systemic issue. It also bypasses necessary internal controls and consultation, which is a failure of due diligence and could violate SEC reporting requirements for accuracy and completeness. Another incorrect approach is to delay reporting the findings to senior management and the audit committee. This violates the principle of timely disclosure and oversight. The audit committee has a fiduciary responsibility to oversee financial reporting and internal controls. Failing to inform them promptly is a breach of this responsibility and could be seen as an attempt to conceal or downplay a significant issue, leading to regulatory sanctions and loss of trust. A third incorrect approach is to dismiss the findings as immaterial without proper assessment. Materiality is a key concept in financial reporting. A determination of immateriality must be based on objective criteria and a thorough understanding of the potential impact on users of the financial statements. A subjective dismissal without due diligence is a failure to adhere to accounting standards and could result in misleading financial statements, a violation of SEC rules. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a situation should follow a structured decision-making process. First, gather all relevant facts and understand the nature and potential impact of the discrepancy. Second, consult internal policies and procedures, as well as relevant regulatory guidance, in this case, U.S. GAAP and SEC rules. Third, engage with relevant internal stakeholders, such as legal, compliance, and senior management, to ensure a coordinated and informed response. Fourth, document all steps taken and the rationale behind decisions. This systematic approach ensures that actions are compliant, ethical, and in the best interest of the company and its stakeholders. Question 12. System analysis indicates that a new creative project is in development that draws significant inspiration from iconic characters and storylines owned by a major entertainment company. While the intent is to create an original work, the similarities in character archetypes, narrative themes, and visual aesthetics are notable. The development team is eager to proceed quickly to capitalize on market trends. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance and mitigate risk? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive legal review by intellectual property counsel to assess potential copyright and trademark infringement before proceeding with significant development or public release. Option B. Rely on the internal creative team's assessment that the new work is sufficiently distinct and original, and proceed with development without external legal consultation. Option C. Proceed with the project as planned, making minor stylistic changes to the characters and plot, and assume that the creative differences will be sufficient to avoid legal issues. Option D. Immediately reach out to the intellectual property owner to negotiate a licensing agreement or a profit-sharing arrangement, without first understanding the full extent of potential legal exposure. Correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive legal review by intellectual property counsel to assess potential copyright and trademark infringement before proceeding with significant development or public release. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing creative freedom with the need for accurate and responsible representation of intellectual property, particularly when dealing with a beloved and globally recognized brand like Disney. The core difficulty lies in navigating the fine line between inspiration and infringement, ensuring that new creative works do not dilute or misappropriate the established value and goodwill associated with Disney's characters and stories. This requires a nuanced understanding of copyright and trademark law, as well as a strong ethical compass, to avoid misleading the public or unfairly capitalizing on another's creative output. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough legal review to assess potential copyright and trademark infringement. This aligns with best professional practice by prioritizing legal compliance and risk mitigation. Specifically, it demonstrates a commitment to respecting intellectual property rights, which is a fundamental ethical and legal obligation. By seeking expert legal counsel, the team ensures that their creative endeavors are grounded in a solid understanding of relevant laws, preventing potential litigation, reputational damage, and financial penalties. This proactive stance safeguards both the company's interests and the rights of the original creators. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to proceed with the project without any legal consultation, assuming that minor alterations are sufficient to avoid infringement. This fails to acknowledge the complexities of intellectual property law and the broad protections afforded to established brands. It represents an ethical failure by disregarding the potential harm to Disney's intellectual property and a legal failure by risking copyright and trademark violations. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on the subjective opinion of the creative team regarding the distinctiveness of their new characters. While creativity is essential, legal rights are not determined by personal perception. This approach is professionally unsound as it bypasses objective legal analysis and could lead to significant legal repercussions. It is an ethical lapse as it prioritizes expediency over due diligence and a legal failure due to the high probability of infringement claims. A third incorrect approach is to attempt to settle with Disney by offering a small percentage of future profits without a proper legal assessment. This is a reactive and potentially exploitative tactic that does not address the underlying legal issues. It suggests an awareness of potential wrongdoing without taking the responsible steps to rectify it. This is an ethical failure, as it attempts to circumvent proper legal channels, and a legal failure, as it does not guarantee immunity from infringement claims, and could be seen as an admission of guilt. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a situation should adopt a structured decision-making process. First, identify the core legal and ethical considerations, which in this case revolve around intellectual property rights. Second, gather all relevant information, including the proposed creative content and any existing legal frameworks governing intellectual property. Third, consult with qualified legal experts to obtain an objective assessment of potential risks and compliance requirements. Fourth, weigh the legal advice against the business objectives and creative vision, making decisions that prioritize compliance and ethical conduct. Finally, document all decisions and the rationale behind them to ensure accountability and transparency. Question 13. Assessment of how a creative team at Walt Disney should proceed when developing a new animated feature film based on a significant historical event that has generated diverse and sometimes conflicting interpretations among historians and the public. The team has received initial feedback suggesting that the current script leans heavily into dramatic conflict, potentially at the expense of nuanced historical portrayal, and that certain character portrayals might inadvertently reinforce outdated stereotypes. Option A. Conduct extensive research with historians specializing in the period and consult with cultural advisors or community representatives to ensure accurate and respectful representation, and revise the script to address concerns about stereotyping and historical nuance. Option B. Commission a public opinion poll to gauge audience preferences on how the historical event should be depicted, and adjust the script based on the majority sentiment. Option C. Proceed with the current script, focusing on maximizing entertainment value and broad audience appeal, assuming that creative liberties are acceptable for fictionalized historical narratives. Option D. Delegate the responsibility for historical accuracy and ethical representation to the marketing department, allowing the creative team to focus solely on artistic vision. The correct answer is A. Conduct extensive research with historians specializing in the period and consult with cultural advisors or community representatives to ensure accurate and respectful representation, and revise the script to address concerns about stereotyping and historical nuance. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing creative freedom with the need for responsible and ethical content creation, particularly when dealing with sensitive historical events. The pressure to produce engaging content for a broad audience can sometimes conflict with the obligation to accurately and respectfully represent complex historical narratives. Disney, as a global brand, has a responsibility to ensure its storytelling upholds ethical standards and avoids perpetuating harmful stereotypes or misinformation, especially when drawing from real-world events that have impacted individuals and communities. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough and sensitive research process that prioritizes historical accuracy and ethical representation. This means consulting with subject matter experts, including historians and potentially descendants or representatives of affected communities, to ensure the narrative is nuanced and avoid sensationalism or misrepresentation. It also involves a critical review of the script and visual elements to identify and mitigate any potential for bias, stereotyping, or trivialization of the historical subject matter. This aligns with ethical guidelines for media production that emphasize truthfulness, fairness, and respect for the dignity of individuals and groups. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to prioritize dramatic effect and audience appeal over historical accuracy and ethical considerations. This could lead to the creation of a narrative that sensationalizes or distorts the historical events, potentially causing offense and perpetuating harmful myths. Such an approach would fail to meet the ethical obligation to represent sensitive topics responsibly and could damage the brand's reputation. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss concerns raised by internal or external stakeholders regarding the historical accuracy or ethical implications of the content. Ignoring valid criticisms or feedback, especially from those with direct knowledge or lived experience related to the subject matter, demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for ethical storytelling principles. This can lead to significant backlash and reputational damage. A third incorrect approach would be to rely solely on readily available popular accounts or fictionalized versions of the historical event without independent verification or expert consultation. This can result in the unintentional adoption and dissemination of inaccuracies or biased perspectives, failing to uphold the standard of responsible content creation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the ethical and reputational stakes involved. This involves proactive engagement with subject matter experts and stakeholders early in the creative process. A critical self-assessment of potential biases and a commitment to rigorous fact-checking are essential. When concerns arise, a structured process for addressing them, involving open dialogue and a willingness to revise content based on evidence and ethical considerations, is paramount. This ensures that creative endeavors are not only engaging, but also responsible and respectful. Question 14. Comparative studies suggest that the interpretation of user consent for the use of personal content in marketing campaigns can be a complex area. Walt Disney, as a global entertainment company, frequently engages with user-generated content. If a marketing team proposes to feature fan-created artwork that includes recognizable likenesses of Disney characters and potentially identifiable individuals in a promotional social media campaign, what is the most compliant and ethically sound approach to obtaining permission? Option A. Utilize the artwork without direct consent, citing broad terms of service agreements that users may have agreed to when joining social media platforms, which permit content repurposing. Option B. Proceed with using the artwork, but only blur any potentially identifiable individuals within the artwork to avoid direct recognition. Option C. Assume consent for using fan-created artwork in promotional campaigns if it is posted publicly on social media platforms, as this indicates a willingness to share. Option D. Obtain explicit, written consent from the individual artists for the specific use of their artwork in the promotional campaign, clearly outlining how their work and likeness will be featured. Correct answer is D. Obtain explicit, written consent from the individual artists for the specific use of their artwork in the promotional campaign, clearly outlining how their work and likeness will be featured. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between a company's desire to leverage user-generated content for marketing and the imperative to protect individual privacy and comply with data protection regulations. The need for careful judgment arises from the potential for misinterpreting consent, the evolving nature of privacy laws, and the reputational damage that can result from noncompliance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes obtaining explicit, informed consent before using any personal data, including images and likenesses, for commercial purposes. This aligns with the principles of data minimization and purpose limitation, ensuring that data is collected and used only for specified, legitimate purposes. Adhering to these principles, as mandated by relevant data protection frameworks, demonstrates a commitment to ethical data handling and builds trust with consumers. It also mitigates legal risks associated with unauthorized data use. An incorrect approach that involves assuming consent based on public posting is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It violates the principle of consent, which must be freely given, specific, informed, and unambiguous. Users posting content publicly do not automatically grant permission for its commercial exploitation by third parties. Another incorrect approach, relying on vague terms of service that broadly permit content repurposing without specific user acknowledgement, also fails to meet the standard for informed consent and can be challenged as unfair or deceptive under consumer protection laws. Furthermore, using content without considering potential implications for individuals, such as misrepresentation or association with unintended products or services, constitutes an ethical lapse and a potential violation of privacy rights. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the data involved and its intended use. This should be followed by a thorough review of applicable data protection regulations and company policies. The next step involves assessing the level of consent required for the specific use case. If explicit consent is necessary, clear and transparent mechanisms for obtaining it must be implemented. Regular training on data privacy, best practices, and ongoing monitoring of regulatory changes are crucial to maintaining compliance and ethical standards. Question 15. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a new interactive feature on a Disney streaming platform could significantly increase subscriber engagement and generate substantial advertising revenue by collecting detailed viewing habits and personal preferences. However, this feature would involve collecting more granular data than currently gathered, including emotional responses inferred from viewing patterns, and potentially linking this data with other Disney-owned services. What is the most appropriate course of action for Disney to ensure regulatory compliance and ethical data handling in the United States? Option A. Implement the feature based on common industry practices for data collection in the entertainment sector, believing that these practices are generally accepted and sufficient for legal compliance in the U.S. Option B. Focus on maximizing the revenue potential of the feature, with a plan to address any potential privacy concerns or regulatory inquiries only if they arise after the feature has been launched and is generating revenue. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive legal review with U.S. Data Privacy Council to assess compliance with CCPA/CPRA and other relevant federal and state laws, perform a privacy impact assessment, and ensure transparent consumer notification and consent mechanisms are in place before launching the feature. Option D. Proceed with the feature's development and launch, relying on the existing terms of service and privacy policy, assuming that general consent for data collection at account creation covers these new data types and uses. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive legal review with U.S. Data Privacy Council to assess compliance with CCPA/CPRA and other relevant federal and state laws, perform a privacy impact assessment, and ensure transparent consumer notification and consent mechanisms are in place before launching the feature. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the potential financial benefits of a new initiative against the significant regulatory and ethical obligations Disney has to its stakeholders, particularly regarding data privacy and consumer protection. The challenge lies in interpreting and applying the relevant U.S. federal and state data privacy laws, such as the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, as amended by the California Privacy Rights Act, CPRA, and potentially other sector-specific regulations to a novel data collection practice. Disney must ensure that any proposed data usage is not only economically advantageous, but also legally compliant and ethically sound, avoiding practices that could lead to consumer harm, reputational damage, or legal penalties. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough legal and ethical review before implementation. This involves engaging legal counsel specializing in data privacy to assess compliance with all applicable U.S. federal and state laws, conducting a comprehensive privacy impact assessment to identify and mitigate potential risks to consumer privacy, and ensuring transparency with consumers about data collection and usage. This proactive stance aligns with the principles of data minimization, purpose limitation, and consumer rights enshrined in privacy regulation, demonstrating a commitment to responsible data stewardship and building trust with its audience. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the potential revenue generation without adequate consideration for privacy regulations would be professionally unacceptable. This would constitute a failure to adhere to the CCPA/CPRA requirements for consumer consent, data subject rights, like access, deletion, and opt-out of sale/sharing, and data security. Such an approach risks significant legal penalties, including fines and severe reputational damage, undermining Disney's brand as a family-friendly and trustworthy entity. Another incorrect approach that relies on a superficial understanding of privacy laws, assuming that general consent obtained at account creation is sufficient for all future data uses, would also be a regulatory and ethical failure. Many privacy laws require specific consent for certain types of data processing or data sharing, and broad, boilerplate consent is often deemed invalid. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the evolving landscape of data privacy rights. A third incorrect approach that involves implementing the initiative based on industry best practices without verifying specific U.S. legal compliance would be problematic. While industry standards can be informative, they do not supersede legal requirements. Failure to conduct a jurisdiction-specific legal review could lead to non-compliance with unique state-level privacy mandates that may be more stringent than general industry guidelines. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a multidisciplinary approach. First, clearly define the proposed initiative and the data it will collect and use. Second, identify all relevant U.S. federal and state privacy laws and regulation. Third, consult with legal experts to interpret these laws and assess compliance. Fourth, conduct a thorough risk assessment, including a privacy impact assessment, to identify potential harms and mitigation strategies. Fifth, develop clear and transparent privacy policies and obtain appropriate consumer consent. Finally, establish ongoing monitoring and auditing processes to ensure continued compliance and adapt to changes in regulations and technology. Question 16. To address the challenge of developing a personal creative project that might have tangential connections to the entertainment industry, what is the most appropriate course of action for a Walt Disney employee to ensure compliance with U.S. intellectual property laws and company policy regarding proprietary information and conflicts of interest? Option A. Begin developing the personal project and only seek guidance from Disney if a legal issue arises during its creation. Option B. Proceed with developing the personal project without informing Disney, assuming it is distinct enough to avoid any IP issues. Option C. Develop the personal project in secret and only disclose it to Disney if it gains significant traction or commercial potential. Option D. Proactively consult with Disney's legal or ethics and compliance department to disclose the personal project and obtain written approval before commencing development. The correct answer is D. Proactively consult with Disney's legal or ethics and compliance department to disclose the personal project and obtain written approval before commencing development. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to regulatory compliance within the Walt Disney Company, specifically concerning the handling of intellectual property, IP, and potential conflicts of interest. The core difficulty lies in balancing the company's need to protect its valuable creative assets with the ethical obligations of employees to avoid situations that could compromise their judgment or expose the company to legal risks. The employee's personal project, while seemingly unrelated, could inadvertently infringe upon Disney's existing or future IP or create a perception of impropriety, especially if it gains traction or is developed using proprietary information or resources. Careful judgment is required to assess the potential risks and ensure adherence to Disney's internal policies and relevant U.S. copyright and trademark laws. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves proactively seeking guidance from the appropriate internal department, such as legal or ethics and compliance, and obtaining explicit written approval before proceeding with the personal project. This aligns with best professional practice because it demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. By engaging with the company's legal and compliance experts, the employee ensures that their personal venture is thoroughly vetted against potential IP conflicts and that all necessary disclosures and approvals are obtained. This proactive measure protects both the employee and the company from potential legal liabilities, reputational damage, and breaches of confidentiality. It upholds the principles of intellectual property law, which grants exclusive rights to creators and requires respect for those rights, and reinforces Disney's internal policies designed to safeguard its extensive IP portfolio. Incorrect approaches analysis. Proceeding with the project without any disclosure or seeking approval is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach disregards Disney's internal policies on intellectual property and conflicts of interest, which are designed to prevent unauthorized use of company resources or IP, and to avoid situations that could lead to legal disputes. It also fails to respect U.S. copyright and trademark laws, potentially leading to infringement claims. Developing the project in secret and only disclosing it if it becomes successful is also professionally unacceptable. This approach demonstrates a lack of transparency and a willingness to operate in a gray area, potentially exploiting loopholes or withholding crucial information from the company. It creates a significant risk of retrospective legal action and reputational damage if the project is discovered to have infringed on Disney's IP or violated company policy. Assuming the project is sufficiently different and therefore poses no risk is a dangerous assumption that bypasses necessary due diligence. Intellectual property law can be complex, and subtle similarities or the potential for future overlap can lead to disputes. Relying on personal judgment without expert legal review is a failure to adhere to prudent risk management and regulatory compliance standards. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should adopt a framework of proactive disclosure and seeking expert guidance. This involves 1. Identifying potential conflicts, recognizing any personal activities that could intersect with the company's business, assets, or policies. 2. Consulting internal policies, familiarizing oneself with relevant company guidelines on intellectual property, conflicts of interest, and outside activities. 3. Seeking expert advice, engaging with the company's legal, compliance, or HR departments to discuss the situation and understand potential risks. 4. Obtaining written approval, securing documented permission before proceeding with any activity that might pose a conflict or regulatory concern. 5. Maintaining transparency, upholding open communication with the company throughout the process. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are made with full awareness of legal and ethical obligations, safeguarding both the individual and the organization. Question 17. Compliance review shows that the Walt Disney Company is preparing to launch a new interactive digital experience for children that will collect personal information. The marketing department is eager to expedite the launch to capitalize on an upcoming holiday season, and they have provided a brief summary of their data handling practices, stating they are compliant with all relevant privacy laws. However, they have not provided detailed documentation or undergone a formal privacy impact assessment. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for the compliance department to ensure adherence to U.S. federal and state privacy regulations? Option A. Advise the marketing department to implement basic data security measures and proceed with the launch, assuming that general industry best practices are sufficient. Option B. Approve the launch based on the marketing department's assurance of compliance, with a commitment to conduct a post-launch audit if any issues arise. Option C. Conduct a thorough, documented review of the digital experience's data collection, usage, and consent mechanisms against all applicable U.S. federal and state privacy laws, including a review of any third-party vendor agreements, before approving the launch. Option D. Request a high-level overview of the data handling practices from the marketing department, and rely on their internal legal counsel's informal confirmation of compliance. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough, documented review of the digital experience's data collection, usage, and consent mechanisms against all applicable U.S. federal and state privacy laws, including a review of any third-party vendor agreements, before approving the launch. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a business unit's desire for expediency and the compliance department's mandate to uphold regulatory standards. The pressure to launch a new product quickly, coupled with the potential for significant revenue, can lead to a temptation to overlook or downplay compliance risks. The compliance officer must exercise independent judgment and resist undue influence, ensuring that all legal and regulatory obligations are met before any public-facing actions are taken. The challenge lies in balancing business objectives with the critical need for regulatory adherence, especially when dealing with potentially sensitive customer data. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough and documented review of the new marketing campaign against all applicable U.S. federal and state privacy regulations, such as the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, and potentially others depending on the scope of Disney's operations and customer base. This includes verifying that the campaign's data collection, usage, and disclosure practices align with consumer rights and consent requirements. The compliance officer must ensure that any third-party vendors involved also adhere to these regulations. This proactive and meticulous approach represents best professional practice because it directly fulfills the compliance department's fiduciary duty to protect the company from legal penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. It demonstrates a commitment to ethical business conduct and adherence to the rule of law, which are foundational to long-term business sustainability. Incorrect approaches analysis. Proceeding with the campaign without a comprehensive privacy review would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It bypasses essential due diligence, exposing the company to potential violations of consumer privacy laws, leading to substantial fines and legal action. This approach prioritizes speed over safety and demonstrates a disregard for customer rights. Relying solely on the marketing team's assurance that the campaign is compliant is also professionally unacceptable. This abdicates the compliance officer's responsibility and assumes that a non-specialist team possesses the expertise to interpret complex privacy laws. It creates a blind spot where potential violations could go unnoticed, leading to the same negative consequences as the first incorrect approach. Implementing a superficial review that only checks for obvious data breaches, without examining the underlying consent mechanisms or data usage policies, is another failure. This approach is insufficient because privacy regulations extend beyond preventing breaches to governing how data is collected, processed, and shared. A superficial review fails to address the nuances of these regulations, leaving the company vulnerable to violations related to consumer rights and transparency. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing similar situations should employ a structured decision-making process. First, clearly identify all applicable regulations based on the nature of the business and the data involved. Second, conduct a comprehensive risk assessment, evaluating potential compliance gaps and their severity. Third, engage in open communication with the business unit, explaining the regulatory requirements and the rationale behind compliance checks. Fourth, document all reviews, findings, and decisions meticulously. Finally, if there is a conflict or pressure to bypass compliance, escalate the issue through appropriate internal channels, seeking guidance from legal counsel or senior management to ensure the company's adherence to its legal and ethical obligations. Question 18. Benchmark analysis indicates that Walt Disney is exploring the integration of advanced AI-powered content personalization tools for its streaming services. Given the Walt Disney hiring assessment tests focus on regulatory compliance, which of the following represents the most prudent and compliant approach to adopting these AI tools? Option A. Rely exclusively on the AI vendor's claims of regulatory compliance and their contractual indemnification clauses to mitigate any potential legal risks. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of all applicable data privacy, intellectual property, and consumer protection regulations. Engage legal and compliance experts to assess AI tool functionalities against these requirements, and develop internal guidelines for ethical AI use and data handling before full integration. Option C. Delay the adoption of AI personalization tools until specific regulatory guidance or mandates are issued by relevant authorities, to avoid any potential misinterpretation of current laws. Option D. Prioritize rapid deployment of AI tools to gain a competitive edge, assuming that any regulatory issues will be addressed reactively as they arise. The correct answer is D. Prioritize rapid deployment of AI tools to gain a competitive edge, assuming that any regulatory issues will be addressed reactively as they arise. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire to leverage emerging technologies for competitive advantage and the stringent regulatory requirements designed to protect consumer data and ensure fair market practices. The rapid evolution of AI, particularly in content generation and personalization, necessitates a proactive and informed approach to compliance. Failure to adequately assess and mitigate risks associated with AI implementation can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and erosion of consumer trust. Careful judgment is required to balance innovation with responsibility. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive, multifaceted strategy that prioritizes understanding and adherence to existing and emerging regulations. This includes conducting thorough due diligence on AI technologies, assessing their potential impact on data privacy and intellectual property, and establishing robust internal governance frameworks. Proactively engaging with legal and compliance teams to interpret and apply relevant regulations, such as those pertaining to data protection, e.g., CCPA in California, if applicable to the Walt Disney hiring assessment tests jurisdiction and intellectual property rights, is paramount. This approach demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory compliance, safeguarding the company and its stakeholders. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to proceed with AI implementation without a thorough understanding of the regulatory landscape. This demonstrates a disregard for legal obligations and ethical responsibilities, potentially leading to violations of data privacy laws, copyright infringement, or unfair competition practices. Such an approach prioritizes speed over compliance, creating significant legal and financial risks. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the AI vendor's assurances regarding compliance. While vendors may offer assurances, the ultimate responsibility for regulatory adherence rests with the company deploying the technology. Delegating this responsibility without independent verification is a failure of due diligence and can result in severe penalties if the vendor's claims are inaccurate or incomplete. A third incorrect approach would be to adopt a wait-and-see attitude, delaying compliance efforts until specific regulatory actions are taken against the company or its peers. This reactive stance is highly risky, as it allows potential violations to accumulate and can lead to more severe consequences when enforcement eventually occurs. It also misses opportunities to build a strong compliance culture and gain a competitive advantage through responsible innovation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a proactive and risk-based approach to regulatory compliance when implementing new technologies like AI. This involves 1. Identifying relevant regulatory frameworks applicable to the company's operations and the specific technology being considered. 2. Conducting a comprehensive risk assessment to understand potential compliance gaps and vulnerabilities. 3. Developing and implementing clear policies and procedures to ensure adherence to regulations. 4. Providing ongoing training to employees on compliance requirements. 5. Regularly reviewing and updating compliance strategies in response to evolving regulations and technological advancements. 6. Fostering a culture of ethical conduct and accountability throughout the organization. Question 19. Benchmark analysis indicates that Disney's upcoming expansion into a new international market requires a thorough impact assessment. Which of the following approaches best reflects a comprehensive and responsible strategy for evaluating the potential effects of this expansion? Option A. Prioritize the assessment of potential intellectual property risks and competitive landscape, deferring detailed social and environmental considerations until after the initial market entry. Option B. Engage in a multi-stage assessment that includes detailed environmental, social, and economic impact studies, proactive consultation with local communities and regulatory bodies, and the development of robust mitigation plans for identified risks. Option C. Conduct a preliminary assessment focusing primarily on projected revenue and market share, with a brief review of potential regulatory hurdles in the target country. Option D. Rely on existing market research from similar past expansions, assuming the new market will present comparable challenges and opportunities. The correct answer is C. Conduct a preliminary assessment focusing primarily on projected revenue and market share, with a brief review of potential regulatory hurdles in the target country. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for timely and accurate impact assessments with the potential for unintended consequences and the ethical obligation to consider all stakeholders. The Walt Disney Company, as a global entertainment and media enterprise, operates under various regulatory frameworks that govern its operations, including those related to environmental impact, consumer protection, and labor practices. A robust impact assessment process is crucial for identifying potential risks and opportunities associated with new projects, such as the development of a new theme park attraction or the launch of a new streaming service. The correct approach emphasizes a comprehensive and iterative process that involves multiple stages of analysis, stakeholder engagement, and mitigation planning. This aligns with best professional practices and regulatory expectations for responsible corporate conduct. Specifically, it reflects a commitment to proactive risk management, transparency, and adherence to relevant laws and guidelines, such as those that might be enforced by the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, for public companies or specific industry self-regulatory bodies. Incorrect approaches fail to adequately address the complexities of impact assessment. One incorrect approach might involve a superficial review that overlooks critical environmental or social factors, leading to potential regulatory violations, reputational damage, and increased costs for remediation. Another incorrect approach could be to solely focus on financial projections, neglecting the broader societal and ecological implications, which would be a failure to comply with ethical standards and potentially specific disclosure requirements. A third incorrect approach might be to delay or omit stakeholder consultation, which can lead to unforeseen opposition, legal challenges, and a lack of public trust, violating principles of good corporate citizenship and potentially specific consumer protection regulations. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the scope and objectives of the impact assessment. This should be followed by thorough data collection and analysis, considering both quantitative and qualitative factors. Crucially, engaging with relevant stakeholders, including employees, customers, local communities, and regulatory bodies, throughout the process is essential. Finally, developing clear mitigation strategies for identified risks and a plan for ongoing monitoring and evaluation ensures that the assessment remains relevant and effective. Question 20. Consider a scenario where a large entertainment company is conducting its annual risk assessment. The assessment team is debating the best approach to identify and evaluate potential threats to the company's operations and reputation. One faction advocates for a comprehensive, multi-layered approach that considers all potential risk categories, both internal and external, and uses a combination of qualitative and quantitative methods to prioritize threats based on their likelihood and potential impact. Another group suggests focusing primarily on risks that have historically caused significant financial losses, while a third group proposes a more informal approach, relying on the intuition of senior executives to identify the most pressing concerns. A fourth perspective is to only consider risks that have a direct and immediate impact on quarterly earnings, which approach best aligns with robust risk management principles for a company of this nature. Option A. Relying on the intuition of senior executives to identify the most pressing concerns. Option B. Focusing primarily on risks that have historically caused significant financial losses. Option C. Only considering risks that have a direct and immediate impact on quarterly earnings. Option D. A comprehensive, multi-layered approach that considers all potential risk categories, both internal and external, and uses a combination of qualitative and quantitative methods to prioritize threats based on their likelihood and potential impact. The correct answer is D. A comprehensive, multi-layered approach that considers all potential risk categories, both internal and external, and uses a combination of qualitative and quantitative methods to prioritize threats based on their likelihood and potential impact. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for proactive risk identification with the practical constraints of resource allocation and the potential for overanalysis. Disney, as a global entertainment company, operates in a dynamic environment with numerous potential risks across its diverse business segments, theme parks, film studios, streaming, merchandise. Effectively assessing these risks requires a systematic approach that is both comprehensive and efficient. The challenge lies in ensuring that the risk assessment process is thorough enough to capture significant threats without becoming so burdensome that it hinders operational agility or becomes prohibitively expensive. This necessitates a nuanced understanding of risk appetite, the likelihood and impact of potential events, and the cost-effectiveness of mitigation strategies. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a structured, multifaceted risk assessment that considers both internal and external factors and prioritizes risks based on their potential impact and likelihood. This aligns with best professional practices in risk management, which advocate for a systematic process that includes identification, analysis, evaluation, and treatment of risks. Regulatory frameworks, while not explicitly detailed for this exam's jurisdiction, generally mandate that organizations have robust risk management systems in place to safeguard assets, reputation, and stakeholders. A comprehensive approach ensures that all relevant areas are considered, from operational disruptions and financial volatility to reputational damage and compliance issues. Prioritization based on impact and likelihood allows for the efficient allocation of resources to address the most critical threats first, demonstrating responsible stewardship and adherence to principles of good governance. Incorrect approach is analysis, focusing solely on immediate, high-profile risks without considering their underlying causes or potential cascading effects, represents a failure to conduct a thorough risk assessment. This approach is reactive rather than proactive and may overlook emerging threats or systemic weaknesses. It can lead to a misallocation of resources, addressing symptoms rather than root causes, and potentially leaving the organization vulnerable to less obvious but equally damaging risks. Adopting a purely qualitative assessment, without any attempt to quantify potential impacts or likelihoods, can lead to subjective and inconsistent evaluations. While qualitative assessment is a valuable component, the absence of quantitative analysis, where feasible, can hinder effective prioritization and decision-making. This can result in an inability to clearly articulate the magnitude of risks to senior management or to benchmark risk levels over time, potentially violating principles of accountability and transparency expected in professional settings. Ignoring risks that do not directly impact immediate financial performance, such as reputational damage or employee morale, is a significant oversight. Modern risk management recognizes that non-financial risks can have profound and far-reaching consequences, including indirect financial losses and regulatory scrutiny. This narrow focus demonstrates a lack of holistic understanding of the organization's risk landscape and can lead to severe, unforeseen consequences, potentially breaching ethical obligation to consider the broader well-being of the company and its stakeholders. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach risk assessment by first establishing clear objectives and scope, defining the organization's risk appetite, and identifying all potential risk categories relevant to the business. This involves engaging stakeholders across different departments to gather diverse perspectives. The next step is to systematically identify specific risks within each category, considering both internal vulnerabilities and external threats. Following identification, risks should be analyzed to understand their potential likelihood and impact, using a combination of qualitative and quantitative methods where appropriate. This analysis informs the evaluation of risks against the established risk appetite, leading to prioritization. Finally, appropriate risk treatment strategies, e.g., avoidance, mitigation, transfer, acceptance, are developed and implemented, with ongoing monitoring and review to ensure effectiveness and adapt to changing circumstances. This structured, iterative process ensures that risk management is an integral part of strategic decision-making and operational execution.